If you have the courage to hear the full nightmare, stay till the end. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to uncover more terrifying stories like this. The air was thick and suffocating as the van disappeared down the cracked road leading into Black Pine Forest. 5 friends, Ethan, Maya, Lucas, Chloe, and Ryan, had dared each other into the infamous woods at midnight. Legend said anyone who entered after the hour of the wolf never returned. Ethan laughed nervously, holding his flashlight like a lifeline, while shadows from the towering trees flickered across their faces. "You guys really want to do this?" Maya whispered, her breath fogging in the cold night air. Lucas smirked. "It's just stories, Maya. Ghosts, monsters, whatever. Nothing can touch us." As they stepped past the forest's edge, a strange hush enveloped them. The crickets, the rustle of leaves, even the distant howl of an animal, everything stopped. It was a silence that pressed into their ears, deep and suffocating. The trees loomed like jagged black teeth, and a fog, thick as smoke, crawled along the forest floor. Did anyone hear that? Chloe froze. A faint whisper brushed past her ear, a sound like someone muttering her name. She spun around, heart hammering. "It's just the wind," Ryan said, but even his voice sounded hollow in the silence. Minutes passed. Then the whispers returned, louder, echoing, but from nowhere. "Ethan, come, closer." The group huddled together, their flashlights dancing across twisted roots and shadowed hollows. The forest seemed to shift, the trees bending unnaturally as if watching. Suddenly, Lucas stepped into a clearing, and the others followed, but a chilling sight stopped them cold. A grave, fresh and muddy, appeared in the middle of the clearing. Carved into the soil was a name, Lucas. "Stop messing around," Ethan said, trying to sound brave, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Lucas's eyes widened. I didn't put that there." Before anyone could react, a dark shape surged from the woods. Shadowy, indistinct, moving faster than any human should. It lunged at Lucas, and in an instant, the friend screamed as his body was pulled into the fog. The last sound of him was a wet, gurgling cry. Maya tried to run, but something cold brushed her ankle, making her stumble. Chloe and Ryan grabbed her, hearts racing, and they bolted blindly, only to find the paths twisting, turning impossibly, leading them deeper. The whispers grew louder, 1,000 voices echoing their names, laughing, taunting, and crying at once. "Stay together," Chloe yelled, but even as she spoke, the forest seemed to breathe around them, dark branches scratching at their skin, pulling at their hair. Every step forward felt like the woods themselves were swallowing them. As they rounded another bend, Ethan tripped over something. The flashlight illuminated a row of stones forming a strange pattern, bones, some still bloody, arranged meticulously. And carved into the largest stone were words that made all their blood run cold. "Tonight, everyone dies, one by one." Maya's scream echoed into the void as a hand, pale and skeletal, shot from the fog and dragged Ryan into the darkness. The whispers now screamed in unison, "Leave, never leave." Ethan and Chloe were alone. The fog closed in, the shadows bending closer. Ethan's flashlight flickered, then went out. "Chloe," he whispered, but the forest answered, "You first." The wind carried a sound of snapping bones. And then, silence. If you think this is terrifying, wait until you see what happens next. Don't skip. The nightmare has just begun. Ethan and Chloe ran blindly through the fog-choked forest, branches lashing at their faces, tearing clothes and skin. The air was cold, yet sweat poured from their bodies. Every sound, the snap of a twig, the distant whisper, the gurgling echoes of Ryan's final scream, made their hearts pound violently. Where is he?" Chloe gasped, trembling, as they skidded over tangled roots. Ethan shook his head, fear rooting him to the ground. "Gone. Ryan's gone." A sudden movement caught Chloe's eye. A figure crouched between 2 trees, completely still, staring at them. Its face was pale, eyes black as coal, mouth stretched into a grotesque grin. She froze. Ethan grabbed her arm. "Don't look at it," he hissed. The figure darted forward faster than any human should move. Ethan swung his arm, trying to push Chloe behind him, but the shadow lunged, passing right through him. It was not solid, yet he felt a cold hand grip his chest, freezing the air from his lungs. A whisper hissed directly into his ear. "You can't escape. None of you can." Chloe screamed as the fog thickened, the whispers multiplying into a deafening chorus. Shapes moved just at the edge of their vision, friends they hadn't seen since entering. Or were they illusions? A distorted version of Lucas appeared, head twisted backward, eyes rolling, skin pale and blistered. "Help me," the figure moaned, then dissolved into mist. Ethan tried to steady his breathing. "We have to keep moving, or we're dead." They stumbled over a mound of dirt and collapsed into a small clearing. The ground was littered with broken branches, animal bones, and something darker, torn scraps of clothing, stained crimson. Chloe recognized a piece. It was Ryan's jacket. The whispers now carried laughter. And then, suddenly, silence. The forest stopped breathing. Ethan's flashlight flickered back on, illuminating a tree directly ahead. Its bark was carved with handprints, deep and fresh, as if someone had clawed at it from the inside. Between the marks were letters, scratched hastily. "One left. One must die next." Chloe shrieked as a branch lashed her shoulder, drawing blood. Ethan grabbed her, dragging her past the tree, but the ground seemed alive, pulling at their feet. Every step forward became a struggle, as though the forest itself wanted to consume them. A shadow fell across them, impossibly wide. Ethan looked up and froze. A massive figure, hunched and jagged, with glowing red eyes and a mouth filled with jagged teeth, blocked the path. Its limbs bent in wrong directions. It made no sound, yet the air around it throbbed with a heartbeat they could feel in their chest. Chloe fell to the ground, sobbing. Ethan raised his flashlight, the beam catching a horrifying detail. The creature had fragments of their friends' faces embedded into its torso, frozen in eternal screams. Before he could react, the creature's arm shot forward, long and spindly, wrapping around Ethan's ankle. He screamed as it yanked him toward its gaping mouth. Chloe clawed at him, but the fog surged in between, pulling her back as Ethan vanished into the darkness. Chloe was alone. The whispers now surrounded her, soft and relentless. "You should have never come. Tonight, you are the last." The forest shifted. Shapes moved in the fog, circling her. Every exit had disappeared. Every tree loomed closer. And then, a hand, pale and skeletal, emerged from the fog, reaching for her chest. Chloe is trapped, but the nightmare has only begun. Stay till the end to see who survives the Whispering Woods. Chloe's chest heaved as the skeletal hand emerged from the fog, its long, jagged fingers curling toward her throat. Every instinct screamed to run, but the ground beneath her seemed alive, gripping her boots like iron chains. She scrambled backward, the fog swirling around her legs, dragging her closer to something unseen. The whispers returned, sharper, mocking, as if the forest itself had grown impatient. "You will join them. You will scream forever." The voice was everywhere, inside her skull, vibrating through her teeth. Chloe clutched her head, but the words persisted. Then she saw it. Something crouched atop a fallen tree, impossibly thin and twisted. Its face was entirely missing, a smooth void, yet it whispered her name in 1,000 voices at once. The thing dropped from the tree silently, landing just meters away. She screamed, bolting blindly into the trees. The forest shifted around her. Pathways twisted and disappeared, roots rising like fingers to trip her. A shadow darted behind, faster than her eyes could follow. Something cold brushed her hair. It was Ryan, or what was left of him, pale and broken, dragging himself along the ground. His mouth opened, emitting a wet, gurgling scream, the sound twisting into a laugh that wasn't his. Chloe stumbled into a clearing, the moonlight dim and sickly. The ground was littered with bones, some human, some unidentifiable. A tree stood at the center, its trunk split, dripping black sap that smelled of decay. And hanging from the branches, her friends. Ethan, Lucas, Maya, all suspended by vines that seemed alive, their eyes wide, their mouths frozen in eternal screams. "No, no, this can't be real," she screamed, backing away. But the forest was closing in. Fog wrapped around her like a serpent, whispering promises of death, dragging her closer to the central tree. From the darkness, a new shape emerged, a massive, hunched figure, taller than any man. its limbs twisting in impossible angles. Its body was stitched together from pieces of the missing, their faces twitching grotesquely. It leaned forward, its breath hot and foul, hissing, one by one, all must join. Chloe turned to run, but a branch shot out like a whip, wrapping around her ankle. She fell, scraping her palms on the cold, wet ground. Her flashlight skidded away, leaving her in total darkness. Panic clawed her chest. She could hear the snapping of bones behind her, closer and closer. Then the whispers intensified, chanting in unison. Do not fight, surrender, the forest claims all. Chloe felt icy fingers wrap around her wrists, pulling her toward the central tree. She screamed, kicking and biting at the shadows, but it was useless. She was lifted off the ground, dangling helplessly as the figure approached, looming over her. Its stitched-together face leaned close, the faces of her friends twitching, eyes rolling, mouths screaming silently. And then, silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that crushes your soul. Chloe hung there, suspended, every muscle frozen in terror, waiting for the inevitable. Chloe dangled from the tree, her body trembling, lungs burning, as the stitched-together figure loomed over her. Its stitched face twisted, the faces of her friends twitching violently, their eyes darting as if alive. Every heartbeat echoed in her skull like a drum of doom. The fog thickened, swallowing the clearing. Whispering voices multiplied, a cacophony of agony. Join us, they cried. The air grew cold, freezing her bones, yet sweat poured down her skin. She kicked and clawed, but the tree's branches wrapped tighter around her arms and legs, holding her as if the forest itself had grown teeth. Suddenly, the stitched figure lunged, its arms extending unnaturally, fingers like broken shards of glass. It grabbed her, pressing her against the tree trunk. Chloe screamed, feeling splinters pierce her skin. Then came the hunger. The tree itself began to move, roots writhing and twisting around her body. They coiled like snakes, tightening with every passing second. Chloe could hear the cracking of her own bones beneath the pressure, her nails scraping at bark that felt alive. The stitched figure whispered, a chorus of voices merging into one. The forest feeds, it always feeds. She struggled, kicking at the ground, but the forest seemed infinite, roots pulling her upward into a grotesque embrace. The fog condensed, forming shapes, faces of the missing friends floating in the mist, mouths opening in silent screams, hands clawing at her. Maya's eyes stared directly into hers, wide and pleading. Help me. A sudden snap. Chloe felt something bite her ankle. She looked down. Worms, black and glistening, wriggled through the soil, burrowing into her boots, climbing her legs. She screamed, thrashing violently. The stitched figure pressed her closer to the tree, its own body melding with the roots, becoming one with the forest. Then came the whispers again, but different this time, commanding, urgent. Scream, suffer, succumb. Chloe's head spun. She caught a glimpse of movement behind her, a shadow, thinner than human, dragging something. It was Lucas, but horribly mutilated, skin peeled, jaw hanging, eyes blank. His mouth opened, and a twisted imitation of his voice called, Chloe. You're next. She tore at the roots, but the forest retaliated. Branches stabbed her sides, vines slashed her arms, and the fog pressed against her chest, making it impossible to breathe. The stitched figure leaned closer, mouths of her friends twitching grotesquely, whispering, You will become part of us, forever. Chloe's vision blurred, blood running from her nose and ears. The roots tightened around her waist, the branches around her arms, pulling her toward the tree. Her flashlight lay forgotten on the ground, beam flickering weakly in the fog. A low, wet ripping sound echoed through the forest. Something was tearing, and it wasn't human. Just as consciousness threatened to slip, the stitched figure's face bent impossibly, its mouth opening like a cavern. Chloe screamed, her voice swallowed by the forest. Something cold and wet touched her cheek, and the whispers roared in unison. Welcome to the hunger of the forest. And then darkness. Chloe has barely survived the first hunger, but the forest is far from done. Stay until the end to see who faces the ultimate terror. Chloe awoke sprawled on the cold, wet ground, her body aching, blood seeping from dozens of cuts. The fog had thickened into a suffocating blanket, swallowing every sound except the whispers, hundreds of voices chanting her name. Her limbs felt heavy, as if the forest itself had claimed them. She struggled to stand, only to see a circle of jagged roots rising from the earth, forming a cage around her. The roots twisted like serpents, each movement deliberate, each one pulsating as if alive. The stitched figure hovered at the edge of the cage, eyes, well, what used to be her friend's eyes, glinting in the dim moonlight. "You," Chloe gasped, clutching her chest. "What do you want from me?" The whispers grew louder, mocking. "The forest wants the heart," the final scream. Suddenly, the ground beneath her shifted, pulling her forward. Roots surged like waves, lifting her off the earth. She screamed as the cage constricted, the thorns piercing her arms. Her hands clawed at the roots, but they dug in deeper. From the fog, shapes emerged. First Maya, then Ryan, then Lucas, horribly mutilated, limbs twisted, skin hanging in shreds, eyes hollow yet screaming silently. They moved closer, floating just above the ground. Chloe's stomach churned. The air smelled of rot and iron. The stitched figure's face leaned forward, the mouths of her friends opening and closing in unison. One by one, they must join, or the forest will feed. Chloe kicked, swung at the creatures, but her strength faltered. Roots wrapped around her torso, dragging her closer to a massive tree at the center of the clearing. Its bark was carved with hundreds of names, all writhing as if alive. At the base was a hollow, dripping black liquid. A low growl emanated from it, a sound that rattled her bones. The ground trembled, and Chloe stumbled backward, only to see that the roots of the tree had begun to form faces, twisted, screaming faces of the missing villagers and previous trespassers. They pressed against the hollow, as if begging her to approach. "No, I won't," her voice cracked. The stitched figure lunged, merging with the roots, turning into a grotesque mass of limbs, faces, and bark. It pulled Chloe closer to the hollow. The whispers roared. "The heart, your scream, feed us." Chloe's vision blurred. She felt hands, some living, some dead, grip her ankles and wrists. She screamed louder than ever, the sound swallowed by the forest. The fog pulsated around her, moving like a living, hungry organism. The cage tightened, forcing her onto her knees in front of the hollow. Then came a sudden, wet tearing sound. Chloe looked up to see the stitched figure's face split open like a gaping maw. Inside were dozens of the missing friend's eyes, all staring at her. She realized the truth. This was no ordinary forest. It was a predator, and it had been feeding, growing stronger with every scream, every life stolen. A cold hand pressed against her chest. She could feel her heartbeat racing, every pulse drawing the forest closer. The hollow seemed to inhale her, the black liquid rising as though calling to her soul. She screamed one final time as the stitched figure's mouths opened wide, the faces of her friends screaming alongside her, merging into the forest's hunger. And then, silence, thick, suffocating, and absolute. Chloe's vision returned slowly, the fog now thick and suffocating, clinging to her like a living shroud. She was no longer in the clearing with the twisted tree, but somewhere worse. The ground beneath her was soft, almost pulsing, as if she walked atop a buried heart. Every step made her stomach churn, the smell of decay so strong she gagged. The whispers were back, louder, closer, as if surrounding her from every direction. The path, the path, the forest hungers. She stumbled forward, but the woods were unrecognizable. Trees bent at unnatural angles, their branches writhing like serpents. Shadows danced where there should be none, forming faces that leered, mouths twisting into eternal screams. A faint glow appeared ahead, a circle of fire flickering without smoke. Chloe ran toward it, desperate, only to realize the flames burned cold. Within the circle lay what looked like a human ribcage, gnawed clean, arranged in a grotesque pattern on the forest floor. And inside the cage, a shadow moved, someone, or something, trapped. Chloe's breath caught. The figure stirred, and she recognized the limp form, Ryan. His eyes were gone, replaced by deep black hollows. His mouth stretched unnaturally as he moaned in a sound that was not human. The whispers grew frantic. One must join next. Before she could reach him, Roots erupted from the ground, grabbing her ankles and yanking her to the earth. The forest seemed alive, writhing and pulling her closer to the hollowed path that glowed with sickly fire. Every scream she tried to emit was swallowed by the fog. From the darkness emerged the stitched figure, more horrifying than ever. Its limbs twisted impossibly, each step leaving blackened scorch marks on the soft earth. Its face, if it could be called that, was a mass of eyes, mouths, and rotting flesh, all twitching as if impatient. Chloe tried to run, but every path led her back, a nightmare maze crafted by the forest itself. The ribcage shifted. Ryan's body lifted slowly, his jaw unhinging, emitting a wet, guttural sound that echoed through the trees. The stitched figure's hands extended, merging with the roots, dragging Chloe closer. The whispers roared in unison. Feed, join, become one with the forest. Chloe screamed, kicking violently, tearing at the roots, but the forest was stronger. The blackened soil beneath her hands moved like worms, coiling around her wrists. A hand shot up from the earth, skeletal, grasping her shoulder. The rib cage cracked open like a jaw, and Ryan, or what remained, lunged at her, teeth blackened, eyes empty. The fire's circle pulsed, growing larger, feeding off her terror. The stitched figure hovered over her, the faces of her friends screaming silently in the fog. Chloe's body was pulled forward, her knees scraping the soil. Her blood mixed with the blackened earth, the forest tasting her fear. Suddenly, from the fog, another shadow emerged, taller, faster, something that had been waiting. It wrapped around Chloe's torso, lifting her off the ground. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening scream. Chloe dangled helplessly in the air, roots and shadows coiling around her like living chains. The stitched figure loomed above, its faces twitching violently, mouths whispering, screaming, chanting her name. Every heartbeat in her chest felt like it could shatter her ribs. The fog pressed against her lungs, thick and choking, as if the forest itself wanted to consume her from the inside out. Below, the hollowed path shimmered with black light, crawling with unseen shapes. Chloe could feel the presence of her friends, or what remained of them, trapped between life and death, their bodies stitched into the roots, twitching grotesquely. The whispers grew urgent, almost pleading. One more, complete the hunger. Suddenly, the stitched figure slammed her against the tree, forcing her face into the bark. Pain exploded in her cheek as the roots shifted beneath her, sinking into the soil. She gasped for air, only to see the ground split open, revealing a pit filled with black water, bubbling with the screams of the lost. From the pit, a hand shot out, skeletal and dripping with dark liquid. It latched onto Chloe's ankle, pulling her toward the screaming void. She kicked and clawed, but another pair of hands grabbed her wrists, lifting her higher. Her screams were swallowed instantly by the fog, replaced by a chorus of whispers chanting her name over and over. Above her, the stitched figure's faces twisted into a grotesque grin. Its voice, or rather, the chorus of voices, spat venomous words directly into her skull. The forest claims all. Your scream is its feast. Succumb. Chloe's vision blurred as the pit's black water began to rise, crawling along the roots toward her. She realized the horrifying truth. The forest didn't just want her alive. It wanted her body, mind, soul, and fear, all consumed and folded into its endless hunger. A sudden movement caught her eye. Shapes emerged from the mist. Vague human forms with limbs bent backwards, crawling along the ground like insects. She recognized them. Ethan, Maya, Lucas, and Ryan. But their faces were twisted, mouths hanging open in silent screams, eyes black and lifeless. They surged toward her pit, only to vanish into the black water, leaving behind the scent of rot. Chloe screamed, swinging her legs wildly. The stitched figure leaned closer, and suddenly the fog pressed down on her face like a physical weight. She could barely breathe. Her hands clawed at the roots, feeling them tighten, digging into her flesh. The whispers escalated to a roar. Join us. Feed the forest. Forever. In a flash, the black water surged upward like a wave, freezing midair around her. The stitched figure's voices merged into one horrifying sound, 1,000 screams layered atop each other. Then, as if on cue, The roots pulled her toward the pit, dragging her face first into the void. Chloe felt the cold embrace of the black liquid, tasting decay, blood, and fear as it began to consume her slowly, drawing her scream into its depths. And then, everything stopped. Silence. The fog hung thick, motionless. Chloe's body dangled above the pit, suspended by unseen forces. The stitched figure hovered, impossibly still, and the whispering ceased for a moment. Chloe is trapped between life and the forest's hunger. The nightmare isn't over. Wait until the next part to see who survives the devouring darkness. Chloe dangled, suspended above the pit of black water, roots tightening like claws around her arms and legs. The stitched figure hovered over her, faces twitching, mouths opening and closing in impossible rhythms. The fog swirled violently, carrying whispers that pierced her mind. The heart. Your scream. The forest wants it all. The black water bubbled and churned, and from its depths, shapes began to rise. Twisted, half-formed bodies of her friends. Ethan emerged first, skin pale and torn, eyes hollow yet staring directly into hers. His jaw hung open in a silent scream, and when he stepped closer, roots burst from the ground to hold him still. Chloe's chest tightened. "Stay back," she yelled, but her voice was weak, swallowed by the fog. The stitched figure laughed, or rather, hundreds of voices laughed at once, a sound that twisted her stomach. Suddenly, a root shot up from the ground and wrapped around her throat, lifting her higher, forcing her to look down into the pit. The black water reflected her face, but it wasn't her face. Her eyes were empty voids, mouth stretched unnaturally, twisted into a scream she hadn't yet made. "You will join," the stitched figure's chorus hissed. "The forest hungers for your heart." Chloe thrashed, kicking at the roots. They sliced her skin, digging into her flesh, and the pain only fueled the forest's hunger. From the fog, another shadow emerged, a tall, thin figure, almost invisible except for its glowing red eyes. It moved faster than thought, circling her, whispering in a voice that was not human. "Scream, bleed, feed the hunger." The black water surged upward, splashing against her feet. Chloe could feel the cold, rotting liquid licking her skin, pulling at her very essence. Shapes of the missing friends reached out from the water, their fingers grasping at her legs, twisting, trying to drag her down. Maya's eyes stared blankly as her mouth opened in a silent plea. Chloe gasped, tears streaming down her face. She swung her legs, kicking violently, breaking one root that wrapped around her ankle. Another root immediately replaced it, as if the forest was alive, anticipating her every move. She screamed into the fog, her voice echoing through the twisted trees, swallowed by shadows. Then, something worse happened. The stitched figure bent impossibly, its faces merging into one massive maw above her. Hundreds of teeth, jagged and uneven, glistened as if wet with blood. From inside the stitched mass came a voice, a scream of all her friends, all at once, distorted, begging, pleading, mocking. "Give us your heart, become one. Forever." Chloe tried to pull herself backward, but the roots surged upward, coiling around her waist. She was dragged closer to the stitched figure, every motion excruciating. The black water rose with her, bubbling violently, and a low growl echoed from the pit itself. Just as the stitched figure leaned in to consume her, a sudden, deafening crack split the fog. The forest trembled, and the roots slackened for a heartbeat. Chloe's heart pounded. She was not free, but a chance had appeared, fleeting and fragile. Chloe dangled above the black pit, the roots digging into her arms and legs like living knives. The stitched figure's massive, twisting form loomed above, hundreds of faces writhing and screaming silently. The black water below churned violently, spitting up shapes of her friends. Ethan, Maya, Lucas, Ryan, each half consumed, half alive, their eyes pleading, their mouths twisted into silent screams. The whispers rose into a deafening chorus. The forest hungers, the forest feeds, the forest wants its heart. Chloe thrashed violently, tearing at the roots. Blood ran down her arms and legs, mixing with the blackened soil, yet the forest only tightened its grip. Every movement she made, the stitched figure mirrored, anticipating, dragging her closer to the hollow of the pit. Her chest burned with fear, every heartbeat echoing in her skull. Suddenly, from the fog, a new shadow emerged. Taller, thinner than anything human, with limbs bending backward and eyes glowing like molten red. It moved faster than thought, weaving through the stitched figure's grasp, circling Chloe. She could hear a wet, guttural voice, impossible and alien. One must fall, the others will feed, you are last. The stitched figures' faces contorted violently, as if enraged. The black water surged higher, engulfing the skeletons of the missing, their hands reaching upward to drag Chloe down. She felt Ethan's fingers, cold, lifeless, grip her ankle. She screamed, kicking, breaking free, but another hand, skeletal and dripping, latched onto her thigh. Chloe's eyes scanned the fog for any escape. The forest seemed endless, twisting paths forming and vanishing at will. The stitched figures' voices roared. Feed, feed, feed the hunger. Suddenly, a branch shot out from the mist, slamming against Chloe's chest. Pain exploded through her ribs. She collapsed forward, only to see a horrifying vision. The forest itself had eyes. The tree's bark split, revealing screaming faces embedded within. Each tree whispered her name, some begging, some mocking, some silently pleading. A sudden, wet ripping sound echoed from the pit. Chloe turned to see Lucas being pulled into the black water, limbs stretching, his skin tearing like wet paper. The stitched figure laughed, or hundreds of voices screamed in twisted unison. One more, one last, join us forever. Chloe tried to pull herself backward, but the roots surged again, coiling tighter, lifting her higher. The black water bubbled and hissed, rising as if alive, waiting to consume her. She could feel the cold liquid licking her ankles, smelling decay, death, and terror. From the fog, Ryan's face appeared, floating in midair. Mouth open unnaturally wide, eyes black voids, whispering, "It's your turn." He lunged, merging into the stitched figure, forming a grotesque mass of faces, limbs, and bark. Chloe screamed, fighting the suffocating embrace, but the forest pulsed around her, alive, hungry, relentless. And then, something impossible happened. The black water surged upward in a wave, higher than the trees, threatening to drown the entire clearing. Chloe hung suspended, terror consuming her senses. The stitched figure opened its massive maw, hundreds of teeth gleaming wet and black. Chloe hung suspended above the black pit, every nerve screaming. Roots and shadows coiled around her like living chains, tightening with each heartbeat. The stitched figure loomed above, a grotesque mass of faces, limbs, and bark, mouths opening and closing in impossible rhythms. The black water below roiled violently, bubbling with the writhing, half-consumed bodies of her friends. The whispers erupted into a deafening roar. Feed. Join. Forever. The hunger is complete. Chloe's hands clawed at the roots, but the forest anticipated every movement. She swung her legs wildly, breaking one root, only for another to coil instantly around her waist. The stitched figure's eyes, Ethan, Lucas, Maya, Ryan, all twisted and stitched into its mass, stared at her with unholy hunger. From the fog, an impossible shadow emerged, taller, faster, limbs bending backward, eyes glowing like molten fire. It lunged at Chloe, and she screamed as the stitched figure's mass shifted, merging with the shadow. The forest itself seemed to pulse, swallowing every sound except her racing heartbeat. Chloe's vision blurred. She could see the pit below, a writhing mass of black liquid, screaming faces, skeletal hands reaching upward. The forest seemed to breathe, alive, sentient, pulsating with anticipation. Every whisper, every scream, every shadow was part of it. Then the stitched figure's voices merged into one final command. Your heart, your scream, become one with the forest. Roots shot from the pit, grabbing Chloe's ankles, wrists, and throat. The black water surged higher, licking her body, tasting her fear. Her screams were swallowed, twisted, folded into the forest's hunger. Shapes of her friends lunged at her, half alive, their hands clawing, mouths opening in silent, eternal screams. Chloe fought with every ounce of strength, tearing at the roots, kicking, biting, But the forest's grip was relentless. The stitched figure's maw opened impossibly wide, hundreds of jagged teeth glistening with black liquid. It leaned forward, ready to consume her completely. In that moment, a flash of memory hit her. Every warning she had ignored, every legend she had laughed at. The forest thrived on fear, on screams, on the souls of the living. She realized she was not fighting for escape. She was fighting to delay the inevitable. The roots yanked her downward, dragging her toward the pit. The stitched figure merged fully with the black water, a writhing mass of faces, limbs, and teeth. Chloe screamed one final time, her voice folding into the whispers of the forest. Her body disappeared beneath the surface, consumed, stitched, folded into the endless hunger. The forest paused for a heartbeat, silent, as if savoring its latest feast. Then, slowly, the fog thickened again. From the blackened trees, shadows shifted, whispering. Another soul, another scream. The hunger never ends. A faint glow emerged in the distance, a new path, twisted and dark, leading deeper into the forest. And as the camera of the mind would follow, a lone figure stepped forward, another group, laughing nervously, daring each other to enter. Unaware the forest was waiting. The stitched figure, now fully merged with the forest, pulsed with life. Countless faces staring from the shadows, mouths open, whispering eternally. Come, join us. Forever. The fog swallowed everything, leaving only the endless whispers of the whispering woods, hungry for the next scream. The forest never forgets, and it's always hungry. Who will be next? Watch carefully, because in the whispering woods, no one truly survives. If you enjoyed this horror story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon for more terrifying stories.